And Major Garrett is at the site of last night's debate, and he joins us now. Major, you spoke with Donald Trump about the criticism from Mitt Romney and John McCain. Trump said that McCain needed to be very careful. And the other day, Trump said something similar about House Speaker Paul Ryan, that if they didn't get along, Ryan would pay the political price. So what's the impact of veiled threats like that?
Well, probably for Speaker Ryan and John McCain, not much, but it does send a collective shiver through Republicans who are contemplating this anti-Trump movement. Look, Trump is at the head of a populist-inspired movement that has drawn, in almost every state that's held a caucus or primary so far, record turnout. And for Trump, what he's telling Republicans is, if you want to try to stop me, you're also trying to stop these hundreds of thousands of people who have showed up at the polls and voted for me. In many cases, voters you haven't seen on your rolls in many, many elections. That's a potent force in American politics, and Trump, whether Republicans like to admit it or not, is at the head of that political movement. And he is telling those in Congress, if you cross me, you're going to have to deal not just with me, but the voters who have put me in this leadership position, or at least this front-runner position. So Trump understands leverage. He understands it in negotiation. He writes extensively about that in his books about negotiation, and he is trying to send a signal, individually in certain cases, Ryan and McCain, but collectively, if you want to mess with me, you're not just messing with Donald Trump, you're messing with the voters who are behind me.
Major, something that stood out last night, aside from all the nastiness, was that Trump was fact-checked repeatedly by the Fox moderators about his changing positions on Afghanistan, Syrian refugees, and whether George W. Bush lied. How did he handle being confronted with his flip-flops?
It was interesting to watch that process unfold, because at times when I have tried to confront Donald Trump about either flip-flops or things that he has said that have evolved over time, he can be very dismissive, very cutting. One time after a debate, he simply just walked away from me and shouted that the question was illegitimate. Last night, he took the statements that were replayed for him and did not deny that they were either evasions or revisions or flip-flops. What he said was, let me try to explain. And he worked through it in a, by Trump standards, pretty measured way. And what that suggests to me is that he knows that the art of deflection at times requires, if not humility, at least a little bit of understanding and explanation. And he tried to be more on the understanding and explanation side than the deflection or arrogance or simply dismissive side. So for that, I think it was a small insight into his evolution as a presidential candidate. I'm not saying it was presidential or non-presidential, but it was a tough moment, and he handled it pretty well.
Major, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio tag-teamed their attacks on Donald Trump last night in the wake of Mitt Romney delivering that speech yesterday where he essentially said that Trump is not qualified to be president. And then at the end of all this, you have all three of the candidates essentially pledging fealty to Donald Trump. I mean, so a lot of people were wondering, why attack him? Why say he's not right for the country, but then still support him?
Right. This is a dimension of attacks really without precedent in a presidential campaign. Look, everyone running for the president says the person to my right or my left isn't as good as I am. I would be a better president. That's very traditional, commonplace, necessary. But now what you have is some in the Republican Party saying this frontrunner is an illegitimate force in the Republican Party. He would do great damage to the country, and he should not be the president of the United States under any circumstance. That is a completely different message. And if you believe that, it's very hard for you to then say, but if he's the nominee, it's okay with me. And that's where this debate ended last night. After all the exhaustive and noisy jousting, in the end, the takeaway for Trump supporters and those wondering if they should join this anti-Trump movement is, well, I guess if the voters say so, he can be the president, well, certainly the nominee, and possibly the president. So it undercuts the sort of dire nature of these criticisms about Trump. But it also reflects something that all these Republican candidates, not named Donald Trump, have begun to realize. The rules are designed to empower the voters who show up at primaries and caucuses. If you deny the voters their choice, as expressed in those primaries and caucuses, you are essentially denying them the democratic process you as Republicans set up through the Republican Party process. That's dangerous business. Dangerous not just for you individually as a political actor, but dangerous for the future of the party. So whatever reservations Republicans have about Donald Trump, they have to, in the end, respect the process they put forward if, in fact, Donald Trump is the one who, through that process, gets enough votes, gets enough delegates, and arrives in the convention in July with what is sufficient under those rules to become the nominee.
All right, Major Garrett for us in Detroit. Thank you.
And this is the cover of the New York Post here in New York City. I don't think anybody thought that on a presidential debate stage you'd have a candidate insisting that parts of his anatomy measured up.
Especially when there are so many other issues. There in Michigan. There's the lead poisoning going on in Flint. There's going to be a debate on Sunday out of Flint, and not a lot of focus on that. But this is what we're talking about today.
In fact, a lot of people on social media seem to feel as if all of the candidates up there gave the governor, Governor Snyder, a pass on what's going on in Flint.
Yeah.